Welcome to True Crime with Strategic Eyes.
Strategic back again. Now, I got a messed up one for you guys today. We're going to be looking at this story that Law and Crime covered, where this ex-offender out of New York, convicted multiple times for committing acts against the most vulnerable in our society, was still out and about in the world, lured a 5-year-old with candy, and did the unspeakable to this youngin'. And I'm talking like this, obviously, because of YouTube's guidelines. We're going to try and get through this. We're going to try our best to follow YouTube's terms of service. Big shout out to Law and Crime for covering this. I would never have heard about this if Law and Crime did not bring this to my feed. And now I'm bringing it to you guys. Let's jump into this. And I want to explain to you guys, as a sex crimes detective that works in the state of New York, I'm going to explain to you why a lot of times these guys are able to get such lenient sentences when they commit these horrific acts. There's a reason for it, and it's a loophole, in my opinion, that we need to change in our laws. It might even require us to do some sort of constitutional amendment to make it easier for prosecutors to defeat this loophole. But it is a loophole. It's not an actual loophole. I don't want to double speak, but it's a loophole. It's a loophole because we're caring people. It's a loophole because we care about victims. It's a loophole because we care about what trauma does to people. But nonetheless, it's a loophole, and it benefits abusers and evildoers like men like him. All right, let's jump into this and get the details on this.
Kind of story that will make your skin crawl. Deputies in New York say this man is a child predator who lured a 5-year-old girl with candy and then assaulted her.
You know, in life, what we find most valuable.
All right, sorry to stop it so soon, but it's amazing how Law and Crime can say every single word that YouTube says we can't say, that if I say, my show will pay for it, but yet they can say it, and there is no question as to whether their show will be put into the algorithm. There's no question as to whether it will be monetized. This is definitely a very, 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 very unfair thing that YouTube does, that they have tiers. Some people can do and others can't, even though we're covering the same thing with the same mission, which is to give a voice to the voiceless. At least that's my mission. I don't know what Law and Crime's mission is, but it's my mission. But yet we're judged on it at a different metric, and I don't understand that. Let's keep going.
To us as our families, especially our children. And when we have an incident like this, it sure does raise the temperature of our tempers.
And what will make you even more mad is that deputies say this isn't the first time he's sexually assaulted a child this year, and he's been a convicted sex offender for more than a decade. We're on the case, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. What a man in central New York is accused of is the nightmare. A predator at a playground allegedly luring a victim, a young victim, just 5 years old, using candy. It is so blatant, it is so horrific that it's hard to believe, and deputies in central New York say this man was already a convicted sex offender. Before I get into the details of what Ryan Pontello is accused of, it's important to know that law enforcement is worried that he has more victims that they don't know about. Here are 3 of his mugshots that deputies in central New York have put out. All of them are related to arrests for sex crimes against children. Pontello's most recent arrest was on June 7th for what he allegedly did to a 5-year-old at a park near his apartment complex in the town of Clay, New York, near Syracuse. Here's the Onondaga County Sheriff.
This Pontello lured a 5-year-old girl from the playground with candy. He lured that 5-year-old girl into a wooded area and committed sex crimes.
Oh my God.
We were able to find and arrest Pontello yesterday and charge him for rape first, sex abuse first.
Yes.
Luring a child. All those are felonies and endangering the welfare.
So in New York, he would face 20 years to life with these charges because he has prior convictions. I just charged the guy via way of grand jury with rape first, sex abuse in the first, sex abuse in the second, and other related charges. These are very serious charges, and they do cover a very high penalty. But that's how it starts out, ladies and gentlemen. It always starts out with the most serious charges, but it's not usually how these cases are adjudicated. And after we get the details on this case, I'm going to explain to you why that is and why guys like him can get such serious charges on the outset, but then they get adjudicated with much lesser charges and convicted of much lesser charges, which result in them going back into the world and creating more victims. Let's listen.
As part of that investigation, we were able to also make an arrest on Pantello for an incident that happened earlier this year to a 3-year-old victim.
Deputies say Ryan Pantello has no previous relationship with
Three.
the 5-year-old. His alleged victim was a random target. Not only is Pantello facing charges for the alleged sexual assault of a 5-year-old, you also heard deputies say they arrested him for a previous sex crimes case against a 3-year-old. And all we know about is that deputies say Pantello sexually abused that victim in the same area as he allegedly did that 5-year-old girl who he reportedly lured with candy. Deputies say they found out about what happened because police were calling 911 at the park. The young victim told her friends, who then told their parents, who called the authorities. Before we get back to this story out of New York, I want to bring you a law and crime legal alert, because if you received a Deborah Rivera birth control
I do have
shot,
to say this. So first of all, I got to pass forward this because we that's their advertisement. I got to say this though. All right, and I don't know if this matters to people, but I want you to understand the law in New York. So in New York, as of January, or it was maybe February, but I think it was January 31st of 2025, New York changed the law of rape in a first with a law called rape is rape. And so now, if you place your mouth on somebody's private parts, or if you put your member inside of somebody's mouth, that is considered rape. It's not criminal sex act or sodomy. Sodomy is no more, but that was the old laws. And then they changed the sodomy laws because of the LGBTQ community felt that it was offensive, and it really was. They used those sodomy laws to arrest consenting adults who were engaging in LGBTQ lifestyles. So it was a very discriminatory law. They changed that to Criminal Sex Act, which encompass anal and oral sex. And in 2025, they said that that was discriminatory as well, and we should not make a differentiation between somebody putting their members forcibly in those areas of people's bodies, which I agree with. I think this is a really good law. So we don't know, without actually reading the arrest documents, what he exactly did. He could have done some version of oral, which in New York State would still be considered rape, which I agree to, right? I just don't understand how we could say that, doing it in the nether regions is somehow worse than doing it in somebody's face. I feel like it's a violation regardless, and it was amazing, very progressive and very pro-victim for New York State to recognize that, to come together in the the legislature, which is such a difficult thing for our politicians to do in this day and age, and pass these bills in a bipartisan way in New York to make sure that victims get that equal treatment, and that we take this stuff seriously in New York, that no matter where you put your member on somebody, you're going to pay the harshest price for it. So let's keep going. I just want to make sure you guys understood how the law works in New York State, because it probably doesn't work that way in any other state. Most other states classify those as something different. In New York, there is no differentiation. You're going to get that top charge regardless. Let's keep going.
Well, friend, and what is shocking in so many ways is that it appears he is a parent himself, a dad to a young teenager. According to Facebook, Pantello loves being a parent so much that he even got this tattoo with his son's name on it. We have blurred that young boy's name. Pontello is a convicted level 1 sex offender, and in New York, that categorizes someone as having low risk of reoffending, which certainly raises a lot of questions for the system and prosecutors in Oswego County, which is north of Syracuse. Right now, we know that Pontello became a sex offender after a 2011 incident involving a 5-year-old in Oswego County. Now, we don't know more because the
How do you make someone a level 1 with that age difference? How does that work? I don't know. Automatically, that bumps your level up. Now, I got to tell you guys, I'm familiar with the entire state of New York because I started my career out working for state corrections, and I travel all over as a sex crimes investigator with state corrections. This is hillbilly town, guys. These areas, this is like hillbilly towns, okay? So it's a little different out there. These aren't big city areas. These very country-ish areas, okay? Very poverty-filled areas with lots of drugs, alcoholism, etc. But I just want you to understand that. Let's keep going.
DA, who is
not making excuses for it, just want you to understand that.
Prosecuting this current case in the Syracuse area, said that Oswego County, where that incident took place in 2011, does not keep records for more than 10 years, but they are expecting to learn more information soon. The authorities were asked,
how do you destroy records for somebody who has been convicted of such a egregious crime? Like, that should be the exemption. Like, you should not keep parking tickets for more than 10 years, but maybe you should keep ex-offender records for somebody who does something to a 5-year-old for more than 10 years. Are you kidding me? I told you, those people is backwards up there. I told you, I done traversed all of those counties, those small little hamlets. I've been to Clay County and all that stuff. I mean, the city of Clay. I've been to all those areas, guys. I'm telling you. They're backwards up there. It's odd up there. It's like you're in the Twilight Zone when you get to those areas. Like, common sense would say those are records that you'd want to keep forever, so that when this happens, where he gets caught up for doing this stuff again, we would be able to go back in time and get the whole picture, which is not too sure if we're going to get those whole pictures now because they don't keep records for more than 10 years. Yeah, it's such a burden to keep records of your worst of your worst. That's probably like the top 5 or 10% of your offenders you'd be keeping records for. We don't care about the guy who stole from your local Walmart. We don't care about the person who got a parking ticket. Destroy those records. Maybe you might want to keep these records. Let's keep going.
In this news conference, if they believe Pontello has more victims, and this is what they said.
You know, the sheriff and I were just talking about that, the likelihood of, and just hypothetically, not directed towards Mr. Pontello, the likelihood of someone with those proclivities remaining dormant for a decade is extremely unlikely.
Very unlikely.
We're going to be doing a deep dive into his background, his location, see what evidence we get from his social media, from his phone.
Yes.
Ping the phone.
They also need to do a forensic interview with his son. Absolutely. They need to do a forensic interview with his son to make sure he did not do anything to his son. And they do need to do a very deep dive on this guy, go backwards, because a lot of kids that age don't know how to handle that type of trauma. They might shut down and never tell anyone. They need to find out the relatives that's been exposed to him. That's a biggie, because you have the familial ties that aids in the silencing. Your mother's not going to love you anymore if you tell her because she loves me. She's my sister. She's my aunt, whatever. She's not going to love you anymore. I'll kill your mother if you say something. These are the things that these people will say to get that silence from a very young victim. They need to do a 360 investigation around this guy. Everybody who was in his orbit, wherever low income apartment blocks he lived in, they need to find out where it's at and go ask some questions, because these guys can't stop. They can't stop. That's why we have to enact the policies of Florida. We need to rise above politics. And we need to say, Florida's got it right when it comes to capital punishment for these type of crimes. You cannot save this guy. It's either we are good with making this people like him wards of the state for all eternity until they die in prison, or I believe we do a much more humane way by saving them from that mundane existence of incarceration for all eternity and we put them to sleep. I think that that is the more humane thing to do. It's fair to that person. It's also fair to society because it saves us money. There's nothing that you can do to help this person unless, of course, you're going to pay a parole officer to act like a home health aide and literally have 3 shifts of parole officers living in the home with this person to make sure that they're being watched 24 hours a day to ensure that they're not doing something wrong. We can't afford that. I'm pretty sure the parole officers would be happy, like, oh, I'll get paid $8 just to sit on a couch next to this guy and watch TV and then go home and then the next shift take over and that's all I'm doing. And you're paying me $95,000, $100,000 a year, which is what they pay parole officers in New York State, $100,000 a year. You want to pay me $100,000 to sit in this guy's house and watch him all day long? Sure. There's a lot of people who would love to do that job, but we can't afford it. So since we can't watch people like him 24 hours a day, and therefore they could go to parts and say, hey, you want some candy? I don't know when a screwdriver became candy, but use your imagination. You want some candy? Come on over here. And then the worst happens and a life is destroyed. That child was worth more than our inability to get things right. We got to get the job done and get it done right, which means change these laws. I'm going to tell you what the problem is with the law in a second. Just a little bit more from these guys.
We'll find out where he's been, et cetera, et cetera. There are a number of incidents, again, I shouldn't say a number. There's one incident that occurred where no suspect was developed and he was not identified in a photo lineup, but the location and the MO are remarkably similar.
Right.
And it's kind of a heartwarming thing because that case, a sexual assault, was prevented by 2 youngsters who I think dived in to protect their brother from potentially being a victim.
Now, when you say brother, that means that they definitely have to, because listen, not all of, the pedophiles are like, they don't care what the gender of the victim is. Some of them have, how should I say? Preference. That's exactly the word that I wanted to say. My mind just went blank. Some of them have preferences. Some of them don't. It appears he does not have a preference. And that's why it's so important that they do a forensic interview with his son to make sure that his son was not a victim as well. But let's keep going.
It's important for you folks to get the word out there, not only his photo, but to constantly remind parents about, educating their kids.
Yes.
About what's appropriate behavior, not appropriate, and then this luring of candy. A lot of times a dog is used as a prop. I lost my puppy. I lost my kitten, so forth and so on. No police officer is going to ask a child, unless it's an emergency situation, to come into his car or to take a kid into a remote area like that. So it's important that you folks get that word out.
It does appear that Pontello flew under the radar, even as a convicted sex offender. At multiple locations, the YMCA of Central New York sent out a notice in the wake of his arrest to members that a registered sex offender was a member of their Y. A spokesperson telling Syracuse.com that person is no longer a member. Now, even though they wouldn't outright say for some reason that Pontello was a member and that was who they were talking about, they did say that the member was involved in a recent incident in the same town as Pontello and that they learned about what had happened through news reports.
All right. Let me just make sure they're not giving us anything else probative.
The Y says they use a third party to
All right, no worries. So I'm going to leave it there because I want you to go over to Law and Crime and watch the remainder. And they got a lot left on this, so there might be much more probative stuff. But on this channel, we're trying to veer away from playing the entirety. We never really did it like that, but we definitely don't want to start doing. We're not playing the entirety of other people's intellectual property. It's just not fair. It's not fair to the content creators, whether it's a big corporation like Law and Crime or a small YouTube channel or a large YouTube channel. It just doesn't matter. We obviously got probative information from this Law and Crime show. I want you to go over to Law and Crime. I want you to watch the rest for yourself. So we watch pretty much 7 minutes of it, and there's 20 more minutes for you to watch once you go over this. So let me tell you guys right now why guys like him get light sentences. Guys like him get light sentences not because they have, corrupt DAs that don't want to do their job and want to, give more rights to the bad guys and all that stuff. That's not why. Take it from me, a guy who builds cases like this, okay, and submits them to DAs, go through the process, and unfortunately sometimes see guys like this get light sentences. I'll tell you why. It's all about testimony. It's very difficult to have a 5-year-old testify in court. And even if you have a very mature 5-year-old that's able to go before dozens of people, you got a jury of 12 people, and then some of these courtrooms are very large and there's dozens of people, but in most instances, they won't even allow a 5-year-old to testify in the jury anyway. The 5-year-old will most likely be testifying in a separate room with a victim advocate, a therapist, or whatever. But it doesn't matter what venue the 5-year-old is testifying in, because scratch that, they're not going to have a 5-year-old testifying in court. That doesn't happen. But they will testify in a separate area. But the problem is, regardless, that 5-year-old has to go under cross-examination. Anybody who comes and testifies in court has to have the opportunity for the defense to cross-examine them. And because of that, prosecutors make deals so that these type of victims don't have to be cross-examined. And I don't know how to fix it, because the cross-examination is the cornerstone of our Constitution, of our criminal justice system. But it results in, when guys like him victimize vulnerable people, they get light sentences because the DA knows that they can't put their victims on a stand. They can't put them there without traumatizing them. And a defense attorney, a good defense attorney, does not care. They will go at a 5-year-old just like they'll go at a 50-year-old. They will be merciless. They will ask tough questions. They will be mean. They will ask the person to rehash their trauma, the whole nine. In fact, the prosecution has to ask them to rehash their trauma, and the prosecution is on their side. So I don't know how we could fix this, ladies and gentlemen, but these guys, specifically these guys who go after the youth, they get light sentences because it's difficult for a prosecution to put the victims on the stand. We have to find a way to change it. We have to. Even when there are mandatory sentences, it doesn't matter, because what will happen is, of course, this person won't plead guilty to the mandatory charge. Is going to give them a whole bunch of years. They have to plead them down to lesser charges. So instead of rape in the first, they probably get sexual misconduct, or they get rape in the second, or rape in the third, or sex abuse in the second, whatever. Instead of life in prison or 20 years, they get 5 years or 10 years or probation. Why? Why? Because they can't make the victims testify. Because they're too young, they're too vulnerable, they're too traumatized. I've even seen it happen with adults. You can't tell people how to handle their trauma. I've seen grown adults too traumatized to testify, and the DA has no faith that they'll be able to get on the stand and testify in a way that will get a conviction, and therefore they give a sweetheart deal to a bona fide forcible rapist. And then that person gets to go scot-free pretty much, because the DA is just not confident that that adult can handle the rigors of a trial. And I'm not saying that in any way, in a way that disparages that victim. Once again, they're dealing with trauma, and you don't know how you're going to deal with trauma till you get that trauma. So you don't judge people's trauma. I'm just telling you like it is. So anyway, guys, if you're up in that area and you recognize this guy, you think you've ever been around your kids, please contact your local law enforcement agency. Let them know, and definitely advocate for your child to get a forensic interview to make sure that they did not do anything to that child. It's very heartbreaking. It's very sad. I'll see you guys on the next one. Strategic is out of here. Peace.